The person who's going to be scoring and keeping time for us today. She's one of the new wave of British science fiction, Fran Terminiello. So, our four contestants. First up, ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause for Emma the Animal Newman. Can we have an equally big round of applause? Gareth Cheeky Monkey Powell. Up next, can you give it up for Stacia 6 Strokes of the Cane? And finally, Christopher the Power Bookmeyer. Okay, so, for those of you who don't know how Just a Minute is played, we will ask each of our guests in turn to talk for 1 minute without hesitation, deviation or repetition on a science fiction and fantasy subject. The others will try and spot when they hesitate, deviate or repeat themselves, and then they will take over the minute and attempt to carry on. So, let's begin with Emma. I'd like you... Can you all try your buzzers, by the way? Just try your buzzers.
No! They died.
Ring. Oh? Yeah? Gareth? No?
Need to wait for the light to go out.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Is that working?
I'm waiting for that light to go out so I can test it.
Okay. Excellent. That's the most technology we've ever had for this game. Okay, so Emma, I'd like you to speak for 1 minute without hesitation, deviation or repetition on the subject of my urban fantasy. My urban fantasy. And of course, the guests are allowed to use the words in the description as many times as they like. My urban fantasy starting now.
My urban fantasy would involve many grand, beautiful buildings in a fantastical city and probably China Mieville, in a t-shirt with short sleeves so that I could admire...
Gareth.
Deviation from decency.
No, it's China Mieville, it's not deviation.
I think that's a wrong challenge.
It's fantasy, people.
I award a point to Emma for an incorrect challenge, and with 14 seconds gone, Emma keeps the subject of my urban fantasy starting again now.
We would talk about all sorts of things, whether it would be the layout of the city, the meaning that lies beneath this... Sorry, I was thinking about China Mieville.
Stacia. That was sort of a mercy killing, wasn't it?
Yes, I killed myself.
I do what I can.
What was the nature of your challenge?
Hesitation.
Hesitation indeed. Point to Stacia for a correct challenge. And you have about 26 seconds on the subject of my urban fantasy, starting now.
Well, since we're taking my urban fantasy to a very interesting place, I'm going to talk about Batman and how much fun I think it would be to go out in the night with the Dark Knight and look out at Gotham City, which is an urban place, and maybe watch him kick some ass, because I think that would be a lot of fun as well. And then maybe we...
Oh, no, I don't want it to come back to me.
Challenge right from Emma?
A hesitation.
There was indeed an there.
But I don't want it to go back to me.
You can see why in 40 years Nicholas Parsons has never gotten any good at this, can't you? Emma, you get a point, and whether you like it or not, because it's the rules of the game, you have 11 seconds to talk about My Urban Fantasy starting now.
Has been radically improved by the prospect of Batman being with a certain other author that I was discussing before. In fact, I have no idea which I would prefer more, whether it's...
Stop!
Yes! Yes,
So Emma gets a point for speaking as the end of the minute went.
Can I go home now?
And I did think it was perhaps a good idea for this game to be as filthy as Sarah Pinborough was last year, and I thought it would take a while, but they went straight there. Okay, Gareth, I'd like you to talk for a minute without hesitation, deviation, or repetition on the subject of telling a book by its cover. Telling a book by its cover, starting now.
Well, obviously, you probably can tell a book by its cover, which is why people are paid good money to draw pictures on the cover of books.
Stacia.
No, it wasn't me.
Oh. Oh, Emma. Emma, what was your challenge?
The repetition of cover.
Except cover is in the title
Oh, well,
given.
you didn't tell us that before.
I did, I told you all.
I wasn't listening, I was too nervous. Sorry.
Okay, so Gareth gets a point for an incorrect challenge, and that's another 52 minutes. It's just going to feel like that. Gareth has another 52 seconds on the subject of telling a book by its cover, starting now.
Well, if we break it down, I mean, what do you want to tell a book? Because how much can books understand? There's... well...
Christopher, what's the nature of your challenge?
Abject failure.
A point to Christopher there for a correct challenge. And you have 39 seconds on the subject of telling a book by its cover, starting now.
I've always felt that I've been very well served by my cover designers, and that they could probably... they've used all sorts of innovative visual cues in order to give the impression that what they're... Is this...
Yeah, if you could stop the clock. Chris, if you could move a little way back from the mic, I think everybody, if they could be a little further back. We're getting a bit of huff and puff, aren't we? Yeah. Okay, for the audience's comfort. So we'll restart again at 38 seconds, Chris, on the subject of telling a book by its cover, starting now.
Well, those visual cues I was alluding to have served me very well. For instance, I wrote a novel called A Big Boy Did It and Ran Away, which had a large fizzing bomb adorning the frontispiece of said volume, in order to convey that there would be some explosions and terrorism wherein, which facilitated the opportunity.
Stop! I think we hit stop just before you rang the bell. So Chris gets a point for speaking as the whistle went, despite repeating himself so many times. I hear the audience going, I feel your pain, I feel it too. Okay, Stacia. Yes, you are. Stacia, I'd like you to talk for a minute without hesitation, deviation or repetition on the subject of my most embarrassing convention moment. Think of it as therapy. My most embarrassing convention moment, starting now.
Well, actually, my most embarrassing convention moment, aside from this one, was a panel that I did several years ago. It was an erotica panel, and one of the panelists decided...
That's Gareth.
Hesitation, there was an
There was indeed an so we won't get to hear about her erotica panel.
This is a verbal tick, okay? I knew where I was going and what I was saying.
Yeah, it's a bad verbal tick when you're playing this game. I think that's...
Well, now you'll never hear the story.
So, Gareth, spoil sport, gets a point for a correct challenge and has 46 seconds on the subject of my most embarrassing convention moment, starting now.
My most embarrassing convention moment was that time, some of you may remember, when I interrupted Stacia when she was about to tell a really good story on stage. I don't think over the years since then I've ever been quite truly forgiven. People do come up to me in bars all the time, or at least I'm expecting them to later, and say, why did you interrupt Stacia, because that sounded really kind of juicy. But to them I have to say, my other most embarrassing convention moment is when I run out of steam on this particular monologue because I'm really paddling like fury.
Emma.
Sorry, there was hesitation, and I really don't want to do this one, but I couldn't resist it.
It was a bit like the King's speech, wasn't it, really?
I was rescuing him. It was a noble act.
Emma, you have 12 seconds left on my most embarrassing convention moment, starting now.
I would tell you a story about my most embarrassing convention moment, but it is so excruciatingly painful that I am not going to relate it in front of a room of people.
Oh, Gareth.
Please do.
Emma gets a point for well, not a challenge at all, really. Emma gets a point for an incorrect challenge and continues with 1 second remaining on the subject of my most embarrassing convention moment, starting now.
There is a God.
Stacia, I think you got in time there. Stacia, what's the nature of your...
Oh, I just don't think that she can actually say anything in a second, and I thought it would be funny.
Oh, Emma gets another point for an incorrect challenge. You're just gifting this to her now. Okay.
That's the kind of girl I am.
And she also... Oh, and no, but... Okay, and you get another second, because that was actually...
There is no God.
Starting now.
It happened.
Stop! So, just 3 rounds in and I feel like Kermit the Frog already. Emma gets a point for speaking as the whistle went. And now it's Chris's turn to begin. And I'd like you to talk for a minute on the subject of reading my own book. Reading my own book, starting now.
The most memorable occasion of sitting down to read my own book was when I was writing a book called A Snowball in Hell, and I had to dial back and remind myself what its predecessor was actually all about. It was...
Gareth.
Was there an
There was indeed an in that. So Gareth gets a point for a correct challenge. And 45 seconds on the subject of reading my own book, starting now.
I read one of my books once. I don't...
Emma got there first.
Can I just point out that backstage, Emma was really reticent about the prospect of interrupting people and picking them up on really small things. Without being the most merciful.
Sorry, it's that competitive instinct.
Emma, you get a point for a correct challenge and another 40 seconds to passive-aggressively reverse into winning the game. Starting now.
Reading my own book is something which I do not like to do during the editing process, but then I have to do it professionally as an audiobook narrator, which is rather strange. Standing in front of a microphone inside a little booth with a little plosive shield in front of it, trying to act out my characters and not edit at exactly the same time is very difficult. Also, they play your voice to you through headphones, which destroys my brain because I'm trying to process what I'm saying and acting at the same time as hearing my own voice and thinking, oh my...
Gareth.
Repetition of voice.
Yes, indeed, repetition of voice, yes.
Thank you.
So that's with another 8 seconds on reading my own book, starting now.
I read my own books. Usually I start with page 1, then 2, sometimes 3.
Stop! Thank God for that. Gareth gets a point for speaking as the whistle went, and so we come back to Emma. I'm sure she'll be overjoyed.
Yes, I am.
Emma, I'd like you to speak for a minute, without hesitation, deviation or repetition, on the subject of fake geeks. fake geeks.
Has my minute started?
No, starting now.
This is a topic which has been rather controversial in online circles of late, and seems to have something to do with the fact that many misogynistic individuals believe that if one is very slender and attractive, then one cannot possibly have an exclusive access to our online club and real world club. I think this may stem from long-term...
Gareth?
Repetition of club.
Oh yes, repetition of club. Point for a correct challenge. And Gareth has 39 seconds on the subject of fake geeks starting now.
Fake geeks are quite useful when you're geek hunting because you can put them up to attract other geeks.
Chris? Unfortunately, geek is in the subject, so that's not a, that's a what's the word? A false, an incorrect, yes. I think...
Yeah, but he's still using it as a tactic. If he keeps chucking the word in there as often as he's doing.
I don't think we'd hit the point where it was going way over the top. So that's an incorrect challenge. Gareth gets a point, and another 30 seconds on the subject of fake geeks starting now.
You quite often see fake geeks hanging out in geek tavernas on local high streets, serving a variety of pressed meat sandwiches in all sorts of different Vulcan, Klingon...
Emma!
Damn it, I sit on my hands!
Don't sit on your hands.
I'm going to sit on my hands.
Okay, Emma,
Okay.
You have a challenge.
Yes, a hesitation.
Hesitation
Sorry.
indeed. Point to Emma for a correct challenge, and 15 seconds on the subject of fake geeks starting now.
As I was saying, I think that there is perhaps long-term psychological damage for many of us in the community, having spent all of our younger lives being excluded from the mainstream, thinking that nobody who is beautiful could possibly be accepted into our group.
Stop! And Emma gets a point for speaking as the whistle went. Okay, so it's Gareth's turn once more now. Gareth, I'd like you to talk for a minute without hesitation, deviation or repetition on the subject of my bestseller. My bestseller. Starting now.
I want to talk, Paul wants me, in fact, to go on for a minute about my bestseller. The trouble with doing this is that my bestseller has yet to sell best. I am therefore going to have to speculate.
Emma.
Sorry, there was an
There was an yes. So you get a point for a correct challenge, and you have 45 seconds on the subject of my bestseller starting now.
My bestseller would be damp-free. It would have a comfortable chair and a very strong lock on the door to prevent access from zombies. There would be several guns. There would be a year's supply of...
Gareth.
Repetition being there would be about 4 times.
Yeah, there was a lot of there would be.
Sorry, I was seriously thinking about the cellar.
And if you'd said cellar that way again, I was waiting for that. That would have been really cool. Okay, so 31 seconds to Gareth on the subject of my bestseller starting now.
I'm really quite disturbed thinking about Emma's bestseller being in, well, I would be more concerned if I was China Mobile, to be honest.
Chris?
Yeah. Yes, and besmirching my good name.
Yeah, I think that really was not on topic. So a point to Chris, and you have 21 seconds on the subject of my bestseller starting now.
My bestseller I only discovered recently when my publishers gave me some breakdowns of what my books had totaled over the years, and it was A Big Boy Did It and Ran Away, a gaming related...
Gareth?
There are a couple of
Were there a couple of in there? Okay, the point to Gareth...
I think he's misinterpreting the Glasgow accent to hear.
Point to Gareth for a correct challenge, and 8 seconds on the subject of my bestseller starting now.
When I was a lot younger, I owned a sweet shop, and my bestseller was a type of licorice allsort. Now, it wasn't the small pink ones.
Stop! And Gareth gets a point for speaking as the whistle went. Did you really own a sweet shop when you were younger?
No.
Oh, okay.
He makes things up for a living. And he's very good at it too.
Stacia, I'd like you to talk for a minute on the subject of creatures of the night. Creatures of the night. Starting now.
Creatures of the night are something that I think about quite a bit when I sit down to write, because there are so many different types of creatures, and you can write all kinds of varieties of creatures.
Chris.
Repetition of the word right.
Yes, I think there was. Yes. Okay.
I was trying.
A point to Chris for a correct challenge.
It was artistic repetition.
Artistic repetition.
It was carefully chosen to emphasize the point.
But the rules of the game, if the game allowed that, we'd just be sitting up here talking.
Oh, you're such a pedant.
Pedant, actually.
And you can go to pedant hell. That's what you can do.
So, Chris, what just happened? Yeah, Chris got a point for a correct challenge, and you have another 46 seconds on the subject of Creatures of the Night, starting now.
Creatures of the Night is not a phenomenon that has given me much pause until I came to a holiday camp in Wales and gave myself a...
Emma?
There was a hesitation.
There was an there, yeah. So, Emma, you have 36 seconds on the subject of Creatures of the Night, starting now.
These things are only problematic when one has gone to bed of an evening. And then I imagine all kinds of horrible creepy crawlies downstairs. In Somerset, there is a strange proliferation of harvest spiders. They have particularly long legs and make horrible cobwebs everywhere. Thankfully, there are fewer of the variety which have very thick legs and are very, very hairy.
Chris?
I said legs twice.
Repetition of the word legs.
Repetition of legs, indeed. So that's a point to Chris for a correct challenge, and 13 seconds on the subject of Creatures of the Night, starting now.
Creatures of the Night are a major issue in Glasgow.
He's stopping for a long time cultural too, is he?
In Glasgow, we take a long time between words.
Gareth?
Yeah, I left it as long as I could.
Yeah. Point to Gareth for a correct challenge, and 8 seconds on the subject of Creatures of the Night, starting now.
Creatures of the night are particularly problematical if, like me, you don't sleep very well.
Stop! Like what? Oh, no, it's only if you yourself repeat it, but yes. Yeah, I'm glad we had this chat. Okay, I'll never be as rude as that to her in private, really. Dangerous. Okay, so Gareth got a point for speaking as the whistle went, and now we move on to Chris starting, and I'd like you to talk about flash mobs. Flash mobs, for a minute starting now.
Flash mobs wouldn't last very long in Glasgow. If you were to suddenly congregate and get in everybody's way purely for the purposes of publicising something, and you don't have a very heavy police presence protecting you, you're going to get your head kicked in, and we're all going to laugh because you're going to thoroughly deserve it. It's one of these cultural phenomena that we ought to be annoyed about the internet for having precipitated this upon us. It's a wanker's charter because we don't do things quite so spontaneous.
Emma?
There was several hesitations.
There were.
I was hoping someone else would buzz it.
Okay, that's a correct challenge to Emma, and she has 23 seconds on the subject of flash mobs, starting now.
Before I knew what flash mob actually was, I imagined it was lots of people dressing up as Flash Gordon. However, I was educated by the internet, which is not something that happens every day. I'm actually a fan of flash mobs. I greatly...
Gareth got there?
She did the thing I
Yeah.
She did. Okay, point to Gareth, and 7 seconds on the subject of flash mobs, starting now.
Flash mobs are a very interesting phenomenon and can be quite fun. Recently there was one in Bristol.
Stop! And a point there to Gareth for speaking as the
Jedi. The amount of...
What's going on? Oh, yeah, what? Do you want... Are you shouting because you want to know the end of his story, is that it? Oh! It just seems so unlikely. Gareth, do tell us.
It was the largest lightsaber fight. I can't remember how many thousand people were there. Heckling.
Okay then. Was this when you were running the sweet shop?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, because we got through that quite swiftly, I think we have time for another round, don't we? Yes, we do. Yes. Okay. So we'll go back to. Could you give us an update on the scores, Fran? Is that possible right now? Fran's been doing a terrific job. Can we have a round of applause for Fran, please? Who else wants to tell us?
Emma's on 12, Gareth's on 13, Stacey's on 1, and Chris is on 5.
Right. So, all to play for. Oh, yes. And while I remember, there was something I promised last night. And I made a lot of promises last night. Mistakes were made. So, keep them facing you for now, and then we'll all turn them around together. I mentioned this backstage, if you remember. There we go. Okay, and if we could all turn them round at once and take a photo from the audience, off we go. I think we've all now been thoroughly filled. Okay. Right. And then I woke up and I was hosting Just a Minute. Okay, so Emma, if you'd like to start our last round with, that is to say, you'll each have one more go to start a topic, on the topic of losing followers. Losing followers. For a minute, starting now.
I imagine that's very difficult if you're a cult leader, because followers are critical to your plans for world domination. I think that if I was an individual who wanted to lead people into crazy things in the world, I would go on Twitter. Because if there's one thing that everyone knows, Twitter is wonderful, and that's a repetition bug.
Gareth?
Twitter.
Yeah, repetition of Twitter. Point to Gareth, and another 40 seconds on the subject of losing followers, starting now.
Well, I am a cult leader on Twitter, and unfortunately after this afternoon's debacle I expect to lose probably 30 to 40% of my followers. However, if the rest of you would like to make up the difference, I would be ever so grateful. Now, losing followers also is very, very, very double-dogged.
Repetition and very indeed, Stacia. Okay, so Stacia, you've got the subject of losing followers for 20 seconds, starting now.
I think it's a lot of fun to lose followers when they're behind you in the car. If you go really, really fast and, oh shit!
Oh.
Really, really, baby.
It was artistic!
No, really, really.
It's not when he does it.
We're used to padding out manuscripts to make them longer.
I think your editor in the audience must have really loved that. Emma, point to you for a correct challenge, and 12 seconds on the subject of losing followers starting now.
I imagine I have lost many followers since this game began. However, I regret nothing. I have had great fun, and if I lose some people on Twitter who don't...
Stop!
Yes!
So Emma gets a point for speaking as the whistle went, and we start now with Gareth, who I would like to talk about hard SF. Hard SF. For a minute starting now.
As far as I'm concerned, all SF is kind of hard. It's not easy sitting down there and making up stuff that you people will believe. Trust me, I get letters, I get emails, I get things from crazy gun nuts in Germany describing how I've misdescribed a safety catch on a gun. And these scary gun nuts really, really unnerve me.
Emma.
Repetition of gun nut, I believe.
Yes. And several other things that they started crying out in the audience. So a point to Emma for a correct challenge, and another 37 seconds on the subject of hard SF, yes, starting now.
Whilst the temptation to make this into some sort of sexual innuendo is incredibly strong, I will resist, and instead talk about the distinction between hard SF and soft SF. Some people believe it's whether you're a man or a woman writing in the genre. I am not one of those people. I understand that.
Gareth.
Deviation, she is a woman.
Is this war, Gareth?
So I thought you were going to mention she just said people twice, but that's just me. Okay, that's an incorrect challenge for sexism, and Emma gets a point and continues with another 16 seconds starting now.
Instead, I believe that hard SF refers to the plausibility of the concepts within the novel. I have not written in that genre, and so I do not feel qualified to discuss it any further than that. However, I do understand that there are many...
Stop!
I was just about to repeat many.
Stacia. And Emma gets a point for speaking as the whistle went. Stacia, I'd like you to talk to us for a minute, without hesitation, deviation or repetition, on the subject of my acceptance speech. My acceptance speech, starting now.
My acceptance speech will be something that I do not think I would ever give, because I do not think that I would want to. Yeah, I know. that was a hard topic, Paul. That was kind of mean.
Sorry.
You're a mean man.
Chris, you buzzed for...
Yeah, repetition of I do not think.
Indeed.
Not a good thing to be repeating.
You're a mean man too. And you have 50 seconds on the subject of my acceptance speech starting now.
My acceptance speech, whilst being an extremely unlikely turn of events, would be an act of self-indulgence, the like of which has been unparalleled in any awards ceremony. I would only give credence and gratitude towards
Emma?
Hesitation.
There was indeed a hesitation. And that's point to Emma for a correct challenge, and 34 seconds on the subject of my acceptance speech starting now.
My acceptance speech is a situation that I think I would find very difficult to deal with. Being an anxious person, I think I would be very likely to either throw up or faint in the middle of mine, and so I think I would have to concentrate on some sort of top hat and cane singing and dancing routine whilst listing everybody that helped me reach the award in question. I think that people who give such... Thank you.
Gareth?
Were there a couple of I thinks there?
Probably.
Point to Gareth for a correct challenge, and Emma has 7 seconds on the subject
Gareth
of...
does.
No, I mean Gareth
You've
has...
done it again, pal.
Gareth has... That was just a nightmare for you for a moment there, wasn't it? Gareth has 7 seconds on the subject of my acceptance speech starting now.
ladies and gentlemen, members of the Academy.
Emma.
There was a brief hesitation. He keeps doing this every blooming time. He makes me struggle for 30 seconds, then nips in with the last 7, and like, I just wanted to know.
I don't think... Okay, there was.
Justice.
If they start building a Wicker Man, I'm getting out of it. Okay, so that's a point to Emma for... No, it's a point to Emma for a correct challenge. And she has 3 seconds on the subject of my acceptance speech starting now.
A singing and dancing routine would be the perfect...
Gareth.
Repetition of singing and dancing.
There was
I thought it was in each separate segment.
No, it's you yourself, what you've said.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, sorry.
Well, we've only got 1 round left to play now, so I'm sorry I didn't explain that at the top.
All's fair in love and just a minute.
Yeah, I'm a little lost now as to what just happened. Gareth buzzed as it went to the minute, so let's just ignore that buzz. And thank you, Fran. So Emma gets a point for speaking as the whistle went, and we move on to our final topic, which is, Chris, I'd like you to talk about 5,000 words a day. 5,000 words a day, starting now.
5,000 words a day is a writing achievement I could only lay claim to once, which was when I was trying to write my first novel, and in those days I had to write in the spare time that I had.
Stacia.
Right.
Repetition of right, indeed. Point to Stacia, and she has 46 seconds on the subject of 5,000 words a day, starting now.
5,000 words a day is a new diet that I started not too long ago, wherein I sit down at my computer and I force myself to type and type to the exclusion of everything.
Chris.
Oh, goddamn!
You're doing a lot of typing.
Yeah. Point to Chris for
You
a
have
correct
to do a lot
challenge.
of typing when you're writing 5,000 words a day.
I gotta do something with my hands.
Point to Chris for a correct challenge. And you have 35 seconds, 5,000 words a day, starting now.
5,000 words a day is far more Stephanie Meyer than I would be prepared to read, being a particularly big fan of her oeuvre, and I really hope that doesn't get back to my publisher, who will publish a writer by that name. I am... Yeah, thanks for rescuing me there.
I actually think that was a bit harsh that time. So, point to Chris for an incorrect challenge. And Chris has another 17 seconds on the subject of 5,000 words a day to get himself in trouble with his publishers starting now.
5,000 words a day is probably as much as I could possibly manage during just a minute if it went on for about another 10 years. I have... Please somebody interrupt me here, I'm really struggling.
Stacia.
Digression, or whatever they're
Yes.
called. Deviation.
Deviation indeed, yes. So a point to Stacia for a correct challenge, and you have 5 seconds on the subject of 5,000 words a day, starting now.
Well, 5,000 words a day is the topic that we've been sitting here
Stop.
discussing. Ha-ha!
They love you.
Well, to know me.
So, while Fran totals up the final scores, can I ask each of our panellists to just briefly tell you what they're writing at the moment, what they've got out there available, because I like to do this. Emma.
You didn't tell us you would do that. Blank. Yes, I have a book that's coming out this week, and tomorrow at 11 o'clock at the Angry Robots store, I will be signing copies before they're even supposed to be available in the UK. That's urban fantasy, and it's called Between Two Thorns.
Okay, Gareth.
I've got a book about a monkey who swears a lot and flies a Spitfire. I'll be signing copies of it at 1 o'clock over on the Forbidden Planet stall, and you should all come because it'll be brilliant.
Fran, have you got anything out there that they can...
They have a story in an anthology by Fox Spirit Publishing called Tales of the Nun and Dragon, and they have another anthology coming out soon called Tales of the Fox and Fae.
Cool. Stacia?
I have an urban... Now, I'm afraid to talk now. I have an urban fantasy series out with Harper Voyager. It's called the Downside Ghost series, and it's a dystopian, futuristic urban fantasy with witches and ghosts. And I'm working on a dystopian YA, and I'm waiting for my agent's written feedback because he told me what he wanted me to do, but I don't remember a damn thing anyone says to me. So I need it in writing.
And Chris?
And I already signed books, but you can come up to me if you want.
I've just this month published a novel called Bedlam. It's basically it's about a guy who finds himself in an entire universe comprising video games, and it's had its inspiration. Yeah, it had its inspiration in a video game company asked me to develop a first-person shooter with them, and I thought the best way to do that would be to write the novel first rather than wait for the game and write the novelisation later. It's called Bedlam.
And I've got an urban fantasy out called London Falling, and I'll be signing it alongside... Thank you! And I'll be signing... Somebody cares. And I'll be signing that alongside Chris, who'll be signing as well immediately after this on the Forbidden Planet stall. So, Fran, do we have the final scores, please? Do you want to read them out? Reverse order. Go on then. Yes.
In fourth place is Stacia with 5. In third, Chris with 8 points. Emma, very close, second place with 14. And the winner with 15 points is Mr. Gareth Powell.
I'd like to thank all our contestants and thank you very much, and we'll see you next time we play Just a Minute.
Sci-Fi Weekender, put your hands together once again for Paul, Fran, Stacey, Emma, Chris and Gareth. Up next in 5 minutes, comics going digital.